if you're ready to stand on the line, if you're ready to fight back and serve it to the criminals trying to enslave you and steal your wealth through monetary creation and exorbitant taxation, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, water filters, bug-out bags, and first aid kits. Use coupon code PrepperRecon for 5% off your entire order at CampingSurvival.com.
Hey, this is Kim Jong. Your country no good to make friend. Why turn off the internet? I was trying to watch interview on the YouTube.
And this is Vladimir Putin. What's happening for oil prices? Not so good for ruble. I'm hoping I don't find out you guys is involved.
Maybe you need go prepperrecon.com. Check it out, supply store, in case somebody turn off your internet.
These things happen.
They have a so good concealed carry sling with patches more cool than a Dennis Rodman.
And having MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits with IBD, chest seal, quick clot, tourniquet, EMT shears, and much more. Even when I don't wear a shirt, I having IFAC from Prepper Recon with me.
So, go to prepperrecon.com and click Store tab on the top of the home page.
While you still can.
Today's guest is James Anderson from JM Bullion. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Now, James, can you tell us how you got involved in the precious metals arena?
Well, precious metals arena, specifically in the industry, I started working in 2008 with Mike Maloney, who's the #1 best-selling author on the subject. I've been living in Los Angeles for a few years and have an undergrad degree in finance from Loyola New Orleans. Actually, one of my teachers was Ron Paul's economic advisor in his 2008 campaign. He's really well known in the Austrian circle. His name is Walter Block. So I had a couple professors at my college at Loyola University New Orleans who were of the Austrian bend. And that was good because, I didn't just simply get the Keynesian line. I also got, their points of view, which were different than what most universities offer. And when I got involved, I did get involved as well with Ron Paul's campaign in 2007, early on, back in the original Tea Party before it got co-opted. And that was an inspiring time. And so a confluence of politics and what I studied in school and what I saw when I traveled throughout Latin America with my own eyes as far as what we've done in a lot of these countries kind of opened up my eyes to see more or less what's being set up here to happen. It looks like where people are going to be potentially losing a lot of their savings if they're not careful.
Yeah, now you just mentioned that you visited South America. Now you traveled in Argentina shortly after the 2001 collapse of the peso. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually, it was about 2 years later that I arrived there. I wasn't there like when it happened. I got there around 2004. But the residual effects and the psychological effects and the conversations I would have with people about it, it was an everyday thing. You could see a lot of things that had occurred or that had come about as a result of going through that change. It's kind of a violent change. For most people who don't know, who are listening out there, during the 1990s, Argentina made a currency peg with the U.S. dollar. So they basically made the Argentine peso buys the same amount as $1 U.S. dollar. It was just an arbitrary decision their central bank made. And it worked for a while until it didn't work. And they were getting, so indebted, they had to basically, they were getting a lot of pressure on the fact that they were basically gaining a lot of debt. And so all the people in the government, it's one of those things where a lot of people on the inside knew what was coming. And they moved their assets out of the country or they had it in hard assets. And then January 2001, 2002, the Argentine peso went from basically 1-to-1 to, as high as almost 4-to-1, reverting back down toward 3-to-1 when I was living there. And, for me, it was an experience to see a culture that was vastly different from cultures in Central America, to see, firsthand that kind of history in the making was eye-opening. It was eye-opening to see people who did not trust their government whatsoever. To people were very cynical, and that was not something that you saw in the United States in 2004. If you ask most people in 2004 about their country, I mean, most people were gung-ho and all about the United States, and they didn't feel as ashamed as they may feel now about our foreign policy and the way that we act in the world. So yeah, seeing that firsthand in 2004 in Argentina, seeing people having to go back to work because they didn't have any more retirement savings, seeing kids in the streets, basically having to fold boxes at night to help their parents make ends meet. I mean, that was kind of tough to see, because when in the 1990s it was basically like almost a first world country, and it more or less was like a first world country in a lot of facets. But it was like at a third the price. So for me as an expat, I mean, this is literally what I did. I was a golf caddy in Cleveland in the summers. I would caddy and carry golf bags for rich people, and then I would save my currency. And instead of going to get just any old 9-to-5 job yet, I wanted to see some of the world. So I just take my chunk of change and go travel to a country and live there for the winter. And I had a caddy of my own in Buenos Aires. It was a joke. To me, the idea of those goods and services trading like that was it was eye-opening. I couldn't believe that things were so cheap, and it just was like a hammer on the head of when it comes to monetary policy and the results that occur and what people go through because of it, truth is stranger than fiction.
And you said it was a monetary policy that worked until it didn't. And I think that that's pretty much what Dr. Paul's predicting for our economy, is that all of the warfare and the welfare spending that we're doing, that's all being printed out of nowhere to fund it all from the Fed, that it'll work until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, it's basically going to all fall apart. And we're going to have to go through a very, very serious time of revaluation. Now, I think it's really hard for people who've never witnessed anything like that to understand what kind of effect it can have on their lifestyle. Do you think we could ever see those types of conditions in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think, within the next 5 years, there could be some major crisis in the banking system where we could have, 30 to 90 days of very difficult, tumultuous times. I don't know if it would ever, if you look at the grand spectrum of possibilities of things getting very bad, like Mad Max scenario, all the way to no, everything's fine, status quo, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing now and it'll work. It's got to be somewhere in there in the middle. I don't think it's going to be one extreme or the other. It'll probably be a quasi mix. It's usually how life goes. But yeah, I do expect that there will be times where banks will be closed, and there may eventually be bail-ins if you're in the wrong bank. I've been studying a lot of the Bank for International Settlements. They have a a body of guys who go around at the G20 meetings. They're called the Financial Stability Board, and it's they don't even try to cover this. It's so silly. The Bank for International Settlements is like the central bank of central banks. They dictate the terms for all central banks in the Western Hemisphere, basically, and they within their offices have the Financial Stability Board operates out of their actual building. And they were recently at a G20 meeting in Australia and getting the G20 nations to rubber stamp bank bail-in measures, which basically sets up an infrastructure, a homogenized infrastructure, where if you're sitting in a bank that goes bust, they just want to make sure that it's uniform and clean, and all these G20 nations can bail in the deposit holders. I mean, basically, when you read the legislation that they signed off on, it basically says your checking or savings account is unsecured, and the derivatives gamblers are first in line creditors, and you guys are second or third or wherever you are down the chain, of events. So basically, you're fodder for the banksters, and when this goes wrong, those with the right derivative bets get to consolidate and get larger, even larger than they are today. And those that got the wrong bets go bankrupt. There's people who are sitting in their banks probably end up getting some equity in some, half bankrupt bank that gets consolidated into another. And it's just it looks like they're setting up the potential for bail-ins and bailouts simultaneously. It's very hard to know what's going on because they just knocked with the omnibus bill. They just took the teeth out of the Dodd-Frank bill by saying that taxpayer bailouts are now again on play. They're in play. It can happen again.
And then the legislation you were mentioning before, that's the 2005 Bankruptcy Reform Act, isn't it?
The legislation I was discussing earlier is it's if you look up Financial Stability Board in Google, you'll find the website. It's like an innocuous looking website. And they're basically the mouthpiece for the Bank for International Settlements. And they're going around to the G20 nations to try and get everything set up for further consolidation of the banking industry. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's like they're not marking to market what the truth is on their books when it comes to these large commercial banks. Like majority of them, if they actually did true accounting, are bankrupt. But when they finally do come clean, my suspicion is when they do come clean, they're going to do it at in the interest of what they want, not in the interest of what is best for the saver or for the people. It's obvious they don't care about the saver whatsoever. They completely rig interest rates to 0% and subsidize the debtors. They don't actually pay capital here in the market that we have now. So the lack of respect shown day to day is just going to keep going. I don't see why that would change.
And then I think the way that the fractional reserve lending works, and I think this is from Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money. Technically, every bank is bankrupt by definition because they're able to lend about 10 times to what they have on their books.
Yeah, I think he used like a 10-to-1 leverage ratio in his series. But it's even worse than that. Like when you go and look at the numbers, it's larger than that. It's usually like 20 or 30 of leverage that these banks carry, especially like the large commercial ones. So he used a 10-to-1 example, but it's even more levered than that. And yeah, I mean, it's just banking is a sophisticated game of a sleight of hand. And I don't know. I'm pretty idealistic. I like to think that maybe this century we can figure out a way to separate government from money. I mean, I don't see how, the partnership between banks and governments, if that's not outlawed and banned and separated, it's going to be troublesome for humanity.
Yeah, and it would take a lot because and there's so few people that are aware of that. There's so few people that have taken the time to and like you said, they don't really teach this in the colleges. You were really blessed to be under a professor that taught you the Austrian models, but that's typically not what's being taught in the colleges. So unless people go out for theirself and try to learn this for theirself by watching stuff like Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money or something else, then most people are completely oblivious to this. And I think that it's done on purpose by the education system, by the colleges, and it's certainly not taught in public schools.
Oh yeah, that's
anything about money or debt or what the Fed is or how any of this works.
Yeah, I mean, the model of how they taught us for the last, 60, 70 years in schools has just been memorize and recite. I mean, it's basically training you to be a drone and just basically memorize and recite and take mandates and follow mandates, follow all the instructions down to a T and be a good little worker. Where, the truth is that most of the greatest things that have come to humanity have come out of entrepreneurialism, people thinking outside of the box. And so, yeah, when you look at the way that we teach our children and the way that the only hope I really feel is that the internet may help with that. It should free up a lot of stuff. It could free up money. It could free up the way we teach it and the way we learn. I mean, I know for myself, like video is tremendous in the amount of stuff that you can get exposed to now with the internet. Thank God. If it was just like the old television model with 4 channels, I don't know, it would be very hard. You'd be, we'd be back in the Stone Ages working out encyclopedias. It'd be very difficult to learn this stuff. So the speed and quickness of how fast people are learning and getting access to information is a positive thing.
Yeah, and Ron Paul's doing a lot to reform that as well. He's really fought against all of the corrupted institutions of America. He's fighting against the education system with his homeschool curriculum. He's fought against the corruption in politics, and now he's fighting against the corruption in the mainstream media with his video channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised to see, like last year, he was doing interviews about the. He was doing pretty blatant interviews and not really. He was doing interviews with guys, congressmen who've read the 28-page redacted report, and it was really interesting to see how like a lot of the left-leaning media were out there spinning it, and they always try and paint Ron Paul as like a 9/11 truther. That's like they always try and demonize him that way. But it was interesting to hear what the congressmen who actually have read these redacted reports and what's in the redacted report, whether or not it's true. I mean, it's impossible to know any of this stuff is true. I mean, it could all just be, it could all be a psyop. It could all be whatever the government wants to expose and say now or later. But it was interesting to see a congressman sounding, pretty alarmist about what was in that report and hearing Ron Paul interview him. I mean, it's like a 10-minute interview. If you looked it up, you could find it online pretty easily. He's done a few interviews on that.
Yeah, that is really interesting stuff. Now, back to gold and silver. What role does silver and gold play? Are they investments, insurance policy, or stores of value?
I think it's all three, and it just depends on your mindset. Probably first and foremost, like when I think of those two metals, it's like the foundation to somebody's wealth. If you were going to build a pyramid of wealth, you'd want the pyramid, the layers at the very bottom to be very sound and to be something that cannot go bankrupt, that cannot fail. And gold and silver, the only counterparty risk they actually face is that of theft. Whether it's theft by, the biggest threat is theft by someone you know and love. Second might be a neighbor who's jealous or who finds out that you had bullion. The next biggest threats may be, some cop in your town that, figures out that you have gold or something. And then maybe your government goes crazy and decides to confiscate. But yeah, so it's basically, it's flat out insurance. And then as far as where we are today, if you start comparing value versus value, I would still argue that gold and silver is heavily undervalued when you compare it to the amount of stuff and services in the world, especially, financial services and the amount of digital currency and credit that is out there versus the small piles of silver and gold that remain above Earth. So, when we look at the system overall, I think that there's tremendous value, and it's an insurance. Stuff cannot go to zero. You certainly can trust yourself. I would think that you can trust having some in your hand, and then maybe having some in a non-bank facility. Like, personally, I'd suggest, working with professionals that have been doing this for a couple hundred years, like Brinks or Viamat. These are the types of service these companies can offer service to people if they have large holdings. You don't want to maybe have it all in one spot. But yeah, to answer your question, like you said, it's insurance. It is an investment, I think, that has a very high potential upside and a very limited downside given the fundamentals that where we are today. So it's kind of hits all those points.
And you were talking about theft, as far as and you said that yes, a crazed government could confiscate it, but they'd have to go door to door. They'd have to find it. They'd have to locate it. They'd have to prove you had it, which right. Hardly anybody has any. So it wouldn't be a very profitable thing for them to do, to go door to door to try to find it. And then if you've got it buried in your backyard, with a few boxes of nails maybe as decoys around. It's going to take them a while to find that. So the chances of that are pretty slim. And the biggest thing is they can't steal it through monetary creation, through devaluing it by printing more of it, because you can't print gold and silver. You got to get up early, get your shovel, go out, dig it out of the ground, purify it, and mint it into a coin or a bar or whatever. So they can't steal it in the traditional way that they steal the rest of our wealth, which is through just devaluation of the currency. For an example, since the U.S. came off the gold standard in 1971, gold's really performed really well against the dollar, rising from $35 per ounce to right around 12.33, I think, right now.
Yeah,
and so that's about a 3,500% increase.
Right.
If we kept that same trend up for the next 45 years, I think most people would be pretty happy with that. But now the inverse of that is that the dollar's lost 95% of its value.
Right.
So
yeah,
and that's the theft that the government has perpetrated on the rest of our wealth through monetary creation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's only one half of the theft. The other half is the taxation system. So you got you're getting shot at from both sides. It's tough. Like when I look at the numbers, as far as there's a lot of people out there who've done research on the 1% and what constitutes the wealthiest 1% of the United States. There's a report out there that a guy David DeGraw did, and it's tremendous. He's got a chart about, it's not really the 1% that's the problem. It's the crony capitalists at the very tip top. It's the 0.01%. And when you start crunching down on the numbers of how much wealth they've gained, I mean, the game's rigged. It's, George Carlin had it right. He basically said, look, guys, it is a rigged game. The tables are tilted. And, not many people are talking about it, but the game's been fixed. And that's kind of the facts. Unless we have a real revolution, not just politically but spiritually, I don't know how much that's going to change. So getting back to what we can do, where we have dominion and power over, is ourselves, our families, the choices that we make day to day, I suppose. Gold and silver, I do think, are one of those things that, like you said, the government, they're not going to go house to house knocking down people's stuff to take their gold or silver. That's Looniesville. What they would do if they were ever going to nationalize, gold or silver even, is they would offer, some large, higher fiat price for it. And, maybe not even offer, just demand that you turn it in for this amount of new dollars that are now going to be backed with that gold. That would quite likely be the scenario that would play out if they were ever to do that. It's quite unlikely that they will, but if they would, that would be the way they'd do it, through forced, more or less, coerced nationalization of gold and silver. The idea of stormtroopers busting in people's doors, I just don't think that's going to make a lot of sense, because what you'd end up happening is just a lot of shootouts, and it wouldn't look good on their part. They would lose the moral authority on that end if they started doing that stuff.
Now, do you think the silver miners are able to make profits with silver at $17 an ounce?
It depends. Some silver miners that are lone silver miners, like if that's all they do, I don't think they can make that good a profit unless they have a really, really excellent source. Most of those companies, when you crunch down on the numbers, they're not profitable at $17 spot. The ones that make a profit are the ones that operate in places where the labor laws are lax, and large companies like Rio Tinto and stuff like that, where they're moving massive amounts, and silver is simply a byproduct of all the work that they're doing to yank out things like zinc and copper and all those other base metals, basically. So large conglomerates, they could probably yank silver out of the ground around $10 or $11 right now. So they're probably still going to make money, but that's not their sole venture. They're not in the game. Rio Tinto's not in the game to pull silver out of the ground. That's just a byproduct of all the other things they're up to. But a company like, you could name any silver, that's all they do is mine silver. It's going to be hard for them to make a profit when the spot is around 17.
Now, with the Rio Tintos that are just bringing it out as a byproduct when they're digging for base metals. Are they bringing enough out to keep up with demand?
Yeah, I think it's enough at the moment, given the current retail demand that we have, and it's pretty complex when you start crunching down in the retail demand. Are we talking about coins? Are we talking about bars? Are we talking about rounds? And
let's talk about everything from solar panels to silver eagles.
Yeah. All right. Well, when I look at the fundamentals of it, the investment demand in the last decade of like over-the-counter retail bullion demand for silver has grown a lot. It's gone from like 5% of the market, like 1 out of every 20 ounces, to now 25% of the market. So 1 out of every 4 ounces is going into people's pockets to save as like default proof savings, So that's grown a lot, like a 5-bagger in the last 10 years. Where that goes next, I mean, last year we still had records in the Silver Eagles. There was a record amount sold, I think 44 million. And when you look across the board, there's still good demand for silver and gold, especially silver, because I think people see value there. I think I've seen a change in sentiment in the sense that in 2008, that was a lot of fear that was driven in the market. So you had a lot of gold buying. Most people understand gold better than they understand silver, at least when they first come to the market. And a lot of older people who were coming in with their retirement savings were buying pretty heavily. It was very common to see 6-figure orders, people putting their entire IRA in gold or having some silver in it. But since that time frame, I think a lot of people have learned about value and the fundamentals in the markets, and the switch has happened pretty steadily from maybe a 50-50 mix between gold and silver to really, if I look at the retail side now, it feels like it's like a 70-30 mix of silver buying to gold, 80-20 mix even. There's a lot of majority silver buyers, or just that's all they buy is silver. So the main point I wanted to drive home was the fact that it's not simply just a deficit of silver to bring it to the market. It's the infrastructure that's required to make it into coins and wafers and bars and all the businesses that are required to do that and meet demand when it spikes. It's not like a fluid market. Silver and gold, it requires a price to move either up or down to make demand really get going. So it's not flat. And so for businessmen that create, silver coins, bars, wafers, the infrastructure that's required to actually refine it, stamp it, and sell it and move it around, it requires a pretty decent investment in capital, in equipment and such. So a lot of times what you see is, the capital and equipment, it doesn't meet the infrastructure does not meet the demand when it spikes. And then when it goes back down, some of these companies have expanded and the demand's not there. So it's like this catch-22. It's about timing a lot of times. But in my entire, almost 10 years now in the business, it's really the infrastructure. It's not necessarily getting it out of the ground that has been the issue. It has been getting it through the refiners and into a form that's acceptable as an investment grade form.
And then you mentioned the fear that we saw in 2008 that really, really did drive investment demand for silver and gold. Mm-hmm. Now, in the past few weeks, we've seen the ruble drop 30% in one day. We've seen the Swiss franc jump 30% in one day. Right. Do you think this type of volatility creates that type of fear, or could be a catalyst for another period of crashes and things like that? And does that make silver and gold more attractive?
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely. If you were in just the very idea that the Swiss franc, which is supposed to be like a very stable currency, jumped 30% intraday, I mean, that's nuts. Like, now the currency markets are basically the Wild West casino now. It's like amazing the volatility that's being seen there. And yeah, all that does is it breeds uncertainty, and it breeds fear. Basically, I mean that those currency wars, they're escalating, and that brings into question the very foundation of what their existence is.
Now, the comics implemented some trading collars that would limit single-day price moves in gold and silver. That was a couple months ago. Do you think they're expecting some wild swings in the metals prices?
Yeah, are you talking about those rules that they put in where the market can't move X% during a day?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw those, and it just rolled my eyes because basically it's again them just changing the rules to benefit and to basically keep the establishment in order and not let things get away from them. If you look back in like the 1980 silver and gold spikes, I mean, basically they just shut down all long buying and just said, all right, you can't buy long on silver anymore, and just killed the market right there. I mean, the story about the Hunt brothers being the scapegoats of silver stuck. That's what most people in the public think. It was that the Hunt brothers were the reason that silver went to $50, but that wasn't necessarily the case. It was also uncertainty about the dollar's existence, because at that point it had only been about 10 years since it went fully fiat, and it was into question because the deals that we had made with Saudi Arabia I don't think were working that well. They started to jostle a little bit, but back toward I digress and get back to now. Kind of losing my train of thought there, Mark. Sorry.
It's all right. I do that all the time.
No problem. I forgot where we were at. Go for it again. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, anyway, I'm kind of floating off too. But the if you were in rubles in the 90s, or if you were in the rubles back in December, or if you were in pesos in Argentina in 2001, or if you were in whatever Zimbabwe's money was when it deflated, or if you were in marks in the Weimar Republic, if you had the foresight to convert some of that fiat currency into silver and gold, you preserved your purchasing power through those crises, didn't you?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, but I think in all those crises that you just mentioned, there was always the option of having physical dollars, in those countries, and a lot of people did. Like in Argentina, there's a pretty hefty black market. You'd literally see guys standing on the street corners, and that's what they were doing. They were like your local neighborhood black market currency exchanger. And, you just walk up to them and get raped for like 4-to-1 exchange rate when it really should be 3-to-1. That's printed in a newspaper, but hey, it's going to take you forever to wait in line at the bank, so you may as well do this 4-to-1 and go get your groceries. I mean, that's literally what happens. And so and all those things that you had mentioned, there was always like the dollar, because the dollar was still solid and pretty stable. But what happens when the foundation of the entire currency system starts getting shaky? And you're talking about the euro doing that kind of move potentially, or the U.S. dollar. Those are the two biggest currencies in the block. I mean, the dollar is basically 60% of all currency moves throughout the world, and euro is like 20% of it. So then you have like the yen and the pound. I mean, if the foundational currencies really start moving in that type of volatility, and I expect they will, having a hedge of gold or silver is going to help you preserve your purchasing power. There's little doubt in that scenario. It should be very, very good.
And probably the most repeated email and comment that I get on the site is folks that are new and they want to know where to start buying gold and silver. How do they do it? What should they buy? I always recommend. I usually write back, and I end up writing the same thing over and over. But I usually recommend getting 1 ounce silver bars because it's divisible and it's small and it's a good starting spot. And I always recommend going with JM Bullion because I've been personally purchasing from them for 2 years. I was an APMEX guy for a long time, and then JM came along. And some of the silver will be as much as $1 cheaper than APMEX, which prior to JM coming along, that was the best you could possibly do. And I've never had an issue with an order. The only time I ever had to call them was because I put in an order and I was going on vacation, so I had to give them a call and ask them to hold it until I got back so that it wouldn't be delivered until I returned. and no problem. They did that. They put a hold on it, and when I came back from vacation, it came a couple days later. So never had a problem. Now, you've written a guide to bullion investing, and that's kind of aimed at people that are just getting started on it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the title of the book it's slightly misleading because basically the title is The Beginner's Guide to Bullion Investing. But it's not just for beginners. I think it's also for people who are somewhat advanced. There may be some things that you'll learn in this guide that will behoove you later on. Basic, due diligence things that you might want to perform to make sure you never end up getting involved with a coin dealer that is maybe in the red and is utilizing customer funds to finance itself. There was a company like that disappeared in the last year or two and is now bankrupt, and hundreds of their customers are waiting and hoping to get some portion of their savings back. And that company was called Tolving. Anybody out there could look that up. And it was kind of hard to, most people, when you look at like the gold and silver industry, it's pretty opaque. These are all private companies. They're not typically public. And it's kind of difficult to tell how solvent a company is, especially when you go to buy from them the first time. My suggestion, you'll read it in that if you read the guide, is you can use third-party websites that are legitimate human beings leaving reviews. They're not robots and they're not fake reviews. It's a pretty good website. I think let me look up the website real fast. It's called golddealerreviews.com, I think. Mm-hmm. And I mean, make sure that's the right name. Golddealerreviews.com. Yeah, that's it. And you can go there, and our competitors are all there too. I don't care if you see our competitors. I think our track record will stand up highly against theirs. So if you just look at every time you go to place an order from anyone, just make sure you look at the latest 2 or 3 months of reviews to kind of see how they've been performing of late, to make sure that solvency is still there. Because it wouldn't surprise me down the line if another company pulled a Tolving and ended up getting shut down because they were insolvent. I mean, it's small little things like that you would only learn by really, you learn the hardest way of all time. And I want to make sure people can learn that without having to learn the hard way, without losing a good portion of their savings to a bankrupt company. In the guide, you're also going to learn, there's also stuff as far as how you can avoid counterfeit Chinese products that are coming in to the United States. A lot of the high grade counterfeits now are so good that even the X-ray guns aren't going to be able to tell. There's a few gold items I've found online that are coming out of China that are 50 microns in thickness, meaning that an X-ray machine is not going to be able to tell. And the only way you'd ever be able to tell that was a fake is by using sound. And most of the people in the retail street level gold and silver business, they don't have sound. They use typically they use an XRF machine, which only goes like 5 microns in depth. So fake gold products are going to keep coming in until these people get smarter and stop using, step up their game as far as learning about these high-grade counterfeits coming in from China. So you're going to learn a little bit about how you can avoid that always, how you can make sure not to end up buying the wrong products. And there's a whole bunch in that guide as well, just as far as the fundamentals are concerned, of gold and silver, what percentage goes to what industry, and what are the trends that we're seeing. So anyways, the URL is pretty simple. You just go to jmbullion.com and you scroll to the bottom of the page, and there's a little pop-up that asks if you want to get the guide. Or you could just put in JM Bullion Investing Guide in your Google search, and you'll find it. It's 100% free. You just enter your email, and it'll send it to you. It's like 80 pages of digital writing. I didn't have an editor on it, so I apologize. I wish I had an editor. But you'll find, I think, the way that it's written is conversational. It's kind of like the way I'm talking to you right now. I think you'll find that's kind of the way it's written out too.
Very, very cool. And it's a great free resource. Now, for full disclosure, JM Bullion is a sponsor of the Prepper Recon podcast, but I approached JM Bullion 2 years ago when I first started the show, and they were our first sponsor, and they've been with us ever since. But the reason I approached them was because their prices were the best, and the service was so great. And another thing I liked about JM Bullion is that your products are, if I can click and put something in my cart, that product is already in stock. It's not something you're going to sell me something and then you're going to go out and try to source it.
Right.
And there are companies that do that. And I had before finding JM Bullion and before AppMix, had ordered from a company like that, and it was a couple of months for me to get my shipment because they were selling me stuff they didn't even have.
Yeah, I have a hunch of who you're speaking of. There's one that's notorious in our industry that I bought from who I think you're talking about in 2007 in like the spring. I think silver was like at 17 or whatever, and it was like my first big silver buy. I bought like a 100-ounce bar. It took like 5 months for me to get my bar.
Wow.
And like I didn't like freak out. Like back then, it wasn't such a niche community as it is now, like where it's easier to communicate with people who are doing it. Back then, there wasn't as big a stacker community. So, I just I had my printed invoice. I had a receipt, and I'm thinking, well, like, these guys are going to deliver at some point. They can't just not deliver. Luckily, I did get my bar, but it took 5 months. I mean, it was crazy. So yeah, I know what you're saying. Is that was a big point as to why I ended up working with JM. I started with them this past summer. Was the track record, the fact that they had gone through some issues this past beginning, I guess, of 2014 because they were consolidating and streamlining the way that they ship their products and the way that they get it out speed-wise in their inventory and such. But once that was put in place, which kind of happened in the spring, everything has been very, very efficient since then. When I look at the speed of delivery now, it's pretty amazing. People placing orders on Mondays, getting their products, especially if they're a repeat customer, they'll go through the system even faster. They're getting their products within a couple days in the mail. It's very, very fast. And I see that because I'm always on YouTube checking out their unboxing videos and saying hello and, thanking them for their business.
Very cool. Now, you also have regular specials every week. Pretty much, there's some kind of product on special, and sometimes it'll be like the one of my favorites is the Sunshine bars, because sometimes you'll have those for like 99 cents over spot or 89 cents over the spot, and I'll usually stack a few of those anytime I see that special come up, or sometimes it'll be Eagles for $2.99 over spot, which I know that doesn't usually happen either at the end of the year or the first of the year because of the changeover at the U.S. Mint. So they're a little tougher to source for probably those specials, because I know that when you put those specials out, sometimes people will just run them and they'll just wipe out your supply, and you have to pull it because people will wipe it out in a day or two. So you do have to jump on those if you're going to take advantage of them, and those usually come out Monday morning. But now when folks sign up for the investment guide, are they going to get the notifications for the specials as well?
Correct, yeah. If they sign up for the investment guide, they're basically going to sign up as well for the newsletter that goes out on Monday. And it's basically a sales newsletter. It's just going to say hello and offer you a product at a good price. And it's been happening on every Monday morning for the last, we've been doing it now for about 5 months. It's been very successful. We have a lot of people who have been taking advantage of those sales. I think right now, like you mentioned, the 10-ounce Sunshine Mint Silver bar is on sale for 79 cents over spot, which is a nice deal. And that's all in, free shipping, free, fast, discreet shipping to your door. I think we also got British Silver Britannias on sale as well this week. So yeah, if you sign up and get the guide, you'll also be able to, get the emails for the sales. And if you don't want to get the emails, just unsubscribe and just come back every Monday on your own accord. That's totally fine too. It's not that you don't have to get an email from us every day or every Monday to come around and buy.
James, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Preppers and Patriots. American Exit Strategy, Book 1 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, just sold 10,000 copies. So since we just crossed that threshold, as a special way of saying thanks and to help celebrate the success of the book, all week from February 10th, which is today when I'm recording this, 2015, through February 17th, 2015, the book's going to be available in the Kindle store for $1.99. Of course, there's going to be links on prepperrecon.com to click that, and you'll be able to get right to it. Or you can just type in American Exit Strategy on Amazon, and that'll take you straight to the book. And it's $1.99 all week. So if you still haven't had a chance to check that out, now's the time. Thanks and happy prepping.
In the post-apocalyptic thriller, American Exit Strategy by best-selling author Mark Goodwin, America is on the cusp of financial annihilation. Matt and Karen Baer face the challenges of Main Street during a full-scale financial meltdown. Government borrowing and monetary creation have reached their limits. When funds are no longer available for government programs, widespread civil unrest erupts across the country. Matt and Karen are forced to move to a more remote location, and their level of preparedness is revealed as being much less adequate than they believed prior to the crisis. American Exit Strategy uses survival fiction to take an in-depth look at the real-life politics and economics behind the issues that are likely to trigger a currency collapse. American Exit Strategy. Buy your copy in paperback, Kindle, or audio edition at Amazon.com today.